Hello, today we are in lesson 16 of Unit 7, and this lesson we explore biotechnology. So, biotechnology is the application of technology to alter or change living things. So, we've got topics that include changing the living world, the process of genetic engineering, applications of biotechnology, and the ethics and impacts of biotechnology. So, first, we can't get into this section without talking a little bit about the Human Genome Project. The Human Genome Project is a great example of scientists working together, collaborating to map the entire gene sequence of organisms. And specifically, this project was focused on mapping the genome of humans. And it was postulated that once the human genome was mapped, we would kind of have all of these answers to, questions that we have about disease and pathology and curing things that we thought were incurable. And to a degree it did give us a lot of information, but I think it was a little bit underwhelming. So it was a huge collaborative effort to map the human genome, but there's still a lot of information that needs to come out of that. The genetic sciences, though, obviously, when we think about the technology involved with the mRNA vaccines and the potential they hold, the genetic sciences are still really important to pursue because it's still a baby field. When we think about to the beginning of this, go back to the beginning of this unit, and it was really just the 50s and 60s that the 1950s and 60s rather, that people started to think about the inheritance of human traits and where that stuff comes from. In those terms, we're talking about a field of biology that's less than 70 years old, so there's still a lot that we have to learn from here. And I think it's we're gonna just keep learning more and more and more as we go through. So the information in the Human Genome Project, like I said, was useful in the detection, prevention, and treatment of many genetic diseases. But I don't know, looking at the outcome of it, I don't know that it was that like huge, like solved all life's mysteries kind of accomplishment, but that's just my opinion. DNA technology allows scientists to identify, study, and modify genes. Forensic identification is an example of DNA technology. Anytime you've seen a crime show, and there's so many of them, you probably saw them, like do a really quick DNA match and find the bad guy. So we know that DNA technology is very helpful in forensic sciences. And we also know we've seen DNA technology used in questions of parental involvement. You are not the father. What show was that? Jerry Springer? Or it's Maury. Maury was doing that. So we're familiar with those things at this point. And again, just reflect on the fact that this stuff wasn't around that long ago. It's still new technology. Gene therapy is a technique used for correcting defective genes responsible for disease development. Possible cures for gene therapy include cures for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cystic fibrosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and many other disease cures are possible. We know this isn't really being implemented yet. We know that diabetes is a huge issue in our country. We know that cardiovascular disease is one of the number one killers in our country. So we know that this hasn't exactly been implemented as much as maybe some had hoped, but there's still a lot of time to start to apply these sciences. And gene therapy, this picture just kind of sums it up perfectly. You're taking those defective alleles out, replacing them with alleles that are not, I shouldn't say alleles, my apologies, the nitrogenous base. The sequence of nitrogenous bases that is defective is removed and replaced with a sequence of nitrogenous bases that's not defective, hopefully to cure those diseases. It gets complicated when you talk about polygenic situations where more than one gene is coding for one of these disorders. The human manipulation of genetic material of the cell is the technical definition of genetic engineering. Underneath that umbrella is the use of recombinant DNA. Genetically engineered DNA can be spliced from one species onto another species. The DNA then becomes part of the host's genetic makeup and is replicated. One of the choice board activities for you to work on does involve a little bit of a research into recombinant DNA, and you can learn about fluorescent mice, and you can learn about trees that light up and glow. So there's a couple different applications of recombinant DNA that have been pretty interesting over the years. Genetic engineering techniques are used in a variety of industries, as you can imagine, in agriculture, research, and medicine. This genetically engineered cow resists the infections of the udders and can help to increase dairy production. So, they've done some gene splicing and recombinant DNA technology with spiders and goats, and they've created goats that use spider DNA to create a very special type of goat milk. So that's something interesting to look into. Here's something we're probably all familiar with: seedless watermelon. That's genetic engineering. We know that there's been some controversy about GMOs in your food. And that's also a choice board activity to look at the legal battle behind the labeling or not labeling of genetically modified foods. And also, there's some genetic gene splicing that you can do to grow other body parts on organisms. So you can grow new body parts on mice. We actually took a trip, the biology teachers all took a trip out to Hershey to see the recombinant mice, and they are growing human ears. If you ever like lost your ear in a car accident or a fire or something like that, you might be able to have a new ear sewn on that has been generated on the back of a mouse. All right. And so we can donate, the potential for never having to have a blood drive again is possible. The potential for never having to have a kidney transplant again is possible. If you think about the potential to, grow your own organs and tissues using a host organism, the potential is there. What we run into is, like we've said before in some of our other units, there is a spectrum where people agree or disagree about the moral application of this or the ethical application of this. So again, that is something for you to consider, where you fall along these lines. So we are going to stop here, and as usual, you guys are going to do your reading quiz and have a good rest of your day.